Albert Breer, Monday morning quarterback, joining us live. There's a lot of things to talk about. I want to go to last night. So I defended Jimmy G today, and here's my takeaway. Stafford, Brady, and Burrow, for different reasons, didn't practice a lot, didn't play in the preseason, and scuffed it in the first couple of weeks. Jimmy G didn't even get snaps, had a shoulder surgery. They hid the playbook, and this was his first start. And Denver in high altitude and that pass rush, that is a rough opening assignment. I look at the Niners and I'm like, I think they'll beat the Rams next week. I think they're fine. People are freaking out. What was your takeaway on the Niners last night?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they look disjointed offensively. Defensively, it does look like it's coming together.
Yeah.
Like they're going to be one of the best defenses in the league. And obviously a lot of talent on that side of the ball. But I mean, you're right, Colin. Like, I think that there is a lot of like a reacclimation that needs to happen here offensively for the Niners. Jimmy didn't take part in any of the spring work, and in the summer he was off on a side field. He's got the shoulder injury he's coming back from. He's got to sort of reestablish himself with Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk spent the entire offseason working out with Trey Lance, so there's a lot of pieces that need to come together there. And I do think the Niners have the talent to make it work. Obviously, losing Trent Williams for maybe a little while is going to be a blow, but they have the talent on offense to make it work, no question about it. But Jimmy had a really weird offseason, and coming in there in the Seattle game is a little bit different than having a team spend a week game planning for you like Denver had the opportunity to do. So I would expect there probably will be some bumps the next couple of weeks. And, you hope if you're the Niners that by Halloween or so, you're fine with Jimmy in there.
I want to throw this at you with Russell Wilson. So this offense, the Hackett-LaFleur thing, with Aaron Rodgers, in his first year with it, he completed 62% of his throws, passer rating like 94, 95. Second year, different. Last year, it was different. So now Russell brings his act to a new staff, and we don't know if Hackett's the guy or not. And it's like last night, I feel like there's been this deference. Like Russell's like, want to be a good soldier. I'll listen to the coach. Yeah. And Hackett is a nice guy, but he's not going to bulldoze Russell. And I felt like last night, at the end of that game, Russell said, okay, enough. I'm just going to take control of the offense and do me. That's what it felt like to me, that they were feeling each other out, trying to be nice guys. And then Russell finally said, I'm just going to do what I do.
I think he sort of had a lot of that from the start, though, Colin. Like if you look at the beginning of the season, right, that game in Seattle on Monday night, I've talked to a number of different coaches for opposing teams that looked at that tape and said, it looks like the coaches were waiting for Russell to do something in the last minute of that game when they didn't call a timeout. And so I think they've given Russell a fair amount of autonomy out there. And that was part of the deal in bringing Russell over. Russell didn't just want a new contract or a new team. He wanted something that was going to be built around him. And that was sort of his complaint for all those years in Seattle. They played him as a Seahawk as sort of an option quarterback in a run-heavy offense. And he felt like, hey, I can play like a Tom Brady. I can play like a Peyton Manning. And that was where a lot of the friction between Russell and the Seahawks was that the Seahawks didn't really believe he could be that guy. They gave him a shot when Brian Schottenheimer was the OC. But they didn't really believe that he could be that guy. Now, the Broncos are giving him the chance to be that guy. And I think it's going to take some time to work it out. And I mean, I don't know for sure that he's going to make it in, playing that sort of way, but you see it in the way that they're deploying him out there where he's in the shotgun a lot. He's got autonomy out there on the field. And some of those things aren't working quite yet. And I think you saw that at the end of the game last night. You mentioned kind of his autonomy out there and his ability to do things on the fly. I noticed at the end of that game, he's pulling the ripcord a little bit more and using his legs to make plays, where I feel like the first couple of weeks of the season, he was trying really, really hard to be that sort of field general back there where he stood back there, read the field, and got rid of the ball rather than running with it.
Yeah. So, Mike McDaniel, a lot of times it's not just coaching, it's personality. And I think Tua reminds me a little of Dak. He's unbelievable at the podium. You can throw anything at him. He just handles it. He's got kind of a reservoir emotionally to handle chaos. Brian Flores, the owner, Deshaun rumors. I mean, just all Ryan Fitzpatrick. And he's got that sort of conviction about him. He trusts himself. And then McDaniel comes in, who's a brainiac, but he's kind of quirky and funny and witty. Mm-hmm. And I would love to know, you talked about this in your column, like it seems like the personality match works too. Like they really like being around each other.
There was a moment that a couple Dolphins people pointed out to me in the summer where Tua was up at the podium, and everybody in the organization noticed this. And it didn't get a lot of attention nationally, but someone asked Tua, what has changed here? And he looked at the reporter, paused, and said everything. And I think that's sort of like I think illustrates where they are right now. I think Tua felt like the old staff, for better or worse, didn't trust him. And it really didn't help that they kept flip-flopping play callers, that they've kept changing offensive staff. And I think from the beginning, Tua felt like Brian Flores didn't really want him there. And that's, I think, maybe the biggest change is that Mike McDaniel has been brought in to fix Tua Tagovailoa and to help the organization come to a final answer on Tua Tagovailoa. And Mike McDaniel made the conscious decision that the best way to do that is to connect with the guy emotionally, is to get the guy to trust him. And, I think Mike believes that offense can really work for Tua if Tua trusts that it's going to work for him. And so that answer at the podium where he said everything has changed, I think shows that trust has been established. And you see a guy who's going out there and not just trusting himself, when he's talking about things like you're talking about there, Colin, he's trusting himself out there on the field, and he's trusting the people out there around him to do their jobs as well. And that's such a huge part of it. He's trusting the offense to work for him. He's trusting Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to make plays for him. And I think you see a guy who's now playing a little bit more like he did at Alabama, where he can be more of the point guard than having to do everything on the field.
By the way, this receiving core looks a lot like Alabama. Guys after the catch, it really does. So Lamar,
it's not a mistake either.
Exactly. Designed into his strengths, lean into him. So Lamar Jackson would be my MVP today. I've said this for years. I had this argument, not an argument, but a debate with a friend. I said, if you sign him to a contract for 4 years, and after 4 years he got hurt and started eroding, but for 4 years, I knew he didn't make the Super Bowl. He only won the division once. He made the playoffs 3 times. That's reasonable. And he only won 2 playoff games. Of course I would sign him. What's opposed to what? Being, to driving, being Seattle or Arizona, and you're, Band-Aid and Bondoing it and trying to figure it out. Like, I look at this thing with him and I'm like, he wins 77% of his games in a good division. I could just stop there, right? Like, it seems to me he's like adding an element to his game every year. That's what my eyes tell me. What do you hear?
And I'll say this, Colin. There was a play in the Jets game in the opener where he no-looked a safety. He pushed a safety over with his eyes, and he no-looked the ball to Devin Duvernay for a touchdown.
Yes.
And no one picked up on it, right? But it happened. And if Mahomes does that, or Matthew Stafford does that, we're going crazy over it. And you're starting to see Lamar Jackson manipulate defenses from the pocket. And a lot of times that's, the last step for a quarterback as a passer and making the move to the elite level. And I'm not saying he's as consistent a guy when it comes to that sort of stuff as a Patrick Mahomes or as a Josh Allen even is right now. But when you look at what he can bring in the running game, and then you add the fact that he's operating that way from the pocket and that he can manipulate defenses from the pocket, I see a guy who's in command here. And John Harbaugh said it after the game yesterday. He's doing all the things that a quarterback needs to do.
That's right.
From the pocket. Does it look a little bit different than we're used to? Yes. Is there going to be some risk involved in the way he plays? Yes, because there's really no history of a team playing a quarterback the way the Ravens have played Lamar Jackson over his first 4 years in the league. But you can't argue with the results. And you can't argue with who the guy has been for your organization as a leader. And you can't argue with the work he's done because he's improved year over year. And to me, like that no-look pass against the Jets to Devin Duvernay in the opener was a great example of it. Like we all sort of look at Lamar one way, and if you sort of look in different directions at him and look at some of the little things he's doing, you can see some real growth there.
So sometimes in this league, you lose and you feel pretty good about it. Like if I'm San Francisco this morning, I'm like, listen, Jimmy G just needs snaps. Last week was the first week he got all the snaps. I think Buffalo comes out and thinks, we dominated the game and lost. It's in the heat. Now we come back home. Our defense was never on the field. We'll be healthier. And then there's wins where you're like, I don't know. So Green Bay now can't score in the second half. And I believe, and Trent Dilfer said it earlier, because he doesn't trust the young receivers once it's off the script. Once you're off scripted plays, he doesn't trust them. Yesterday, Evans, Godwin, Donovan Smith, Julio Jones. Brady's going through a marriage crisis. Interior offensive line's a mess. And we almost went to overtime. Their last 8 drives, 7 punts. They had 92. But it was interesting, Albert, because if you watched his body language after the first half fumble by Green Bay, he did it again. Aaron went into this, I can't trust my teammates. And their offense ended for the next hour and a half. I looked at that Green Bay win, and I thought, that's concerning. That game shouldn't have come down to a play, right?
Yeah, so I talked to Matt LaFleur when he got off the plane in Green Bay last night, and we talked a bunch about how there are things that they're going through right now that are sort of intentional and that are going to cause some short-term pain. And, what he likes about where they are right now is they're learning how to win games a different way. Like, they need the defense to step up in that spot last night on the 2-point conversion.
Yep.
And look, like Tom Brady put the Superman cape on at the end of that game and drove the team down the field, going to guys like Russell Gage, and winds up getting them in the end zone after changing like a dozen things on that final play to squeeze the ball in there. But on the 2-point play, one of their captains, Devondre Campbell, gets his hand in there, makes the play to make a stop. And I think that they learned that they can win a different way. And I think a big part of this, Colin, and this is an important nuance when it comes to how the Packers have played their seasons the last couple of years. They're using the first month of the season or so as an extended preseason. And look what they're doing. They're getting their rookie receivers, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, before he got hurt, snaps, right? Like, just for better or worse, those guys are going to be out there and those guys are going to learn. They gave Elgton Jenkins and David Bakhtiari extra time to get back healthy. This is all aimed at being a better team in November and December. And if you remember, the same thing happened last year. That weird opener in Jacksonville, it was a home game for New Orleans because they had the hurricane back in Louisiana. New Orleans came out and blew them out with Jameis, and everybody was pushing the panic button then. Packers were doing the same thing. They're trying to figure out where they can get into a spot where they're going to be at their best in November and December. And I really think Matt LaFleur and that staff believe that by giving Watson and Dobbs the snaps early in the season, by giving Jenkins and Bakhtiari a chance to get back fully healthy, they're going to be better offensively when we get to November and December. And in the meantime, they get to learn to win different ways. It was with the running game against the Chicago. Yesterday, it was against the defense against Tampa. And so I think that they feel like they've got a team that's able to win more different ways than maybe it has been in the past. And they really have confidence because Aaron Rodgers is still there that the offense will come along in time.
Albert Breer, Monday morning quarterback. Great stuff as always, man. Appreciate your legwork. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.